I wasn't going to record the second part right away, but Scooter didn't want to move, and I'm not a monster. So now we are going to do the first two antinomies again, but this time from the side of the antithesis. And the antithesis here is from who Kant would call the empiricists. Okay, so you're probably already more familiar with this kind of view. And it's basically the opposite metaphysical view to the dogmatic metaphysicians that we were talking about, or whose viewpoint we were taking on when we were doing the thesis. So predictably, when we go to the first antinomy, what the antithesis says is the opposite of what the thesis said, namely the world has no bounds in space, okay, and there is no beginning in time. And we have a similar kind of proof by contradiction structure where we say, okay, so suppose that there was a first beginning in time, suppose there was a first moment, but when you have a first moment, then what's before it, right? What came before the first moment? If you follow stuff in maybe contemporary physics, you might find people saying, okay, so what was there before the Big Bang, right? So if there was a Big Bang, what was before that? Okay, and I don't necessarily know the answer, but that's the kind of argument that is going on here. So if there's a beginning in time, what happens before? Well, that doesn't make sense. Okay. And similarly, if there is a boundary to space, what is it a boundary between? So if that makes sense, right? If there's a bound, it's like, okay, space is in a box, but what's outside the box? Okay, how can there be a box with nothing outside it? How can there be a boundary with nothing outside the boundary? Okay, so surely it's a boundary between space and something else. But then what's the something else? So that's that particular proof by contradiction. And then when we get to the second antinomy, it says that no composite thing consists of simple parts. There are, in fact, no simple parts. And now what we have is we say, okay, so suppose there were simple parts. Okay, another proof by contradiction. Suppose there were simple parts. Well, then they would be in space. So you would have something simple, but it would be an object. So it would be a simple substance that was still existing in space. But the problem with that is that, when you think about space, well, okay, so but what would the thing be that took up only half the space that simple part did? Okay, so imagine that simple substance. Well, it's in space. So what happens if you kind of imagine having the space that it occupied? What would that be? So how do you know that that's not a simple part, right? How do you know that the simple part is the smallest division you can get to? So it doesn't seem like you can. And so there you have another kind of absurd conclusion based on the second antinomy.